Welcome to Elite Expert Insider Podcast, where we will inspire, motivate, and educate entrepreneurs, innovators, and growth seekers. Brought to you by Elite Online Publishing, making the best and brightest in the industry #1 best-selling authors. 80% of people say they want to write a book. We're assuming that's the same for you. If so, contact us at www.eliteonlinepublishing.com and make your book a reality. Hey, how you doing? It's Melanie Johnson here along with Jen Foster. Hey, Jen, how you doing?
Great. How's everyone today?
Good. So we have another great show for you. Now, you hear all this stuff. Everybody's getting fired from their jobs. They're saying things on Twitter they're not supposed to say. They're not doing what they're supposed to do with their companies. And, the lines keep changing every time we turn around. The buzzword is compliance. So we have the evangelist of compliance. He wrote the Bible on compliance. He's written many of these compliance books. He is the expert. So we're going to go into what is going on with all this. How can you, how it can help your company. Make sure you don't screw up. Make sure no one gets arrested. No one's getting fired, and really dive deep into this. So he's got a new book out that came out, and I love him because he's from Michigan State. Hey, he's a Spartan like me. So before we do that, remember to subscribe to our podcast, because we love to keep you up to date of who the new guests are, who's coming on, and what you're going to learn, and what you're going to get educated about, motivated, and inspired about. So make sure you do that. And, Tom has written a bunch of books. This is his latest that came out, and he's self-published. So we want to encourage you to write a book. They say 80% of the people out there are thinking about or would like to write a book. We've got this great book, How to Write Your Life Story and Leave a Legacy. So if you want to pick that up on Amazon, it has 50 plus questions to get your story started and get your book started. And of course, we would be honored to publish it at eliteonlinepublishing.com. Check us out, and you can put your submission in right there if you're interested in becoming a #1 best-selling author. Tom, how are you doing?
I'm doing great today, Melanie.
So the name of his book is The Complete Compliance Handbook, a guide to operating, I can't even say it, operational, and your compliance program. I didn't say that right. I really butchered that. But
operationalizing.
Operationalizing. Thank you. So it's easier to look at than it is to say at this time of day. So how you doing?
I'm doing great today.
Good. So tell us how you got started.
So I got started in this field about 12 years ago, and I was with a company that had sustained a legal violation, and I was part of the team that helped put a compliance program in, and that was my first experience. I had a short detour, though, that I think we've shared this story, that after my job ended, I decided what I really wanted to do with my life was race bicycles. And so I went off on this great journey to race bicycles. And I had a great amount of fun until one day I got hit by a Hummer, and that ended my cycling career. And after a period of convalescence, I got on my walker and toddled into my office, and I started exploring social media, which I knew nothing about, in 2010. And I've grown to the largest social media platform in compliance now.
Now, how did you pick compliance?
It was the last job I had. That was the focus of my role as the general counsel of the company. In 2010, there were very few lawyers who built compliance programs, which is what the book is about, the nuts and bolts of compliance. So I decided to focus on that. There was a market niche, and so I decided to fill it.
That's wonderful. So how did you write this book? I mean, sounds like you're the evangelist. So out of all these years, you have come up with all of the different rules or regulations, or how did this all come together?
So this was my 16th book I've written about compliance over the past now 9 years. And my writing process really revolves around trying to create as much content with 3 words as possible. So if I write one line, I can generally get 5 pieces of media out of that. I can get a blog post, I can get a podcast, I can get a white paper, I can write ad copy, and I can generally talk about it in a speech and use it in a PowerPoint. So my process is that I would write each individual day. I wrote 12 chapters for not to be too biblical, but 12 months. With one day, you could do one thing at little or no cost to improve your compliance program with 3 key takeaways. From that, I would create a podcast. So last year I podcasted every day on this topic. And that was part of my editing process. At the end of the month, I had a chapter. And then at the end of the year, I had 12 chapters.
Wow. I love that. That's just great for anyone, even in social media, because you're saying take that one line, create all those things out of it. It's like multi-purposing the one topic, because so many people will do one of those things, not all of those things, and spread it everywhere. And you had given me the tip, like if you do 30 days of podcasting on something, you're really going to get a trend and start to get an audience. If it's, how to write a book in 30 days, how to be compliant in 30 days, that's a great tip for any company, which has nothing to do with compliance, but it has a lot to do with promoting your company in social media. So, the gray area in compliance, you don't necessarily tag the word to it. Well, first of all, define compliance to us, because so many people are, what exactly is compliance?
Sure. So every company has ethics. Every company has values. Every company wants to do the right thing. Compliance is the written part of that program, which enables you to do that. So whatever the values of your company are, then you go down and put them in a code of conduct. You write policies and procedures to implement them. Then you train on it. You test on it. You give people incentives on it. You give people a way to report violations through a hotline. You do investigations, and you continually improve your program. So it's really the written backbone of whatever your corporate values are going forward.
Well, that's a great definition. So it's really to keep you out of trouble.
It does. It does. And if the regulators or the government or the police or the FBI ever come knocking and you have a compliance program, that's your legal defense.
Wow, that's great. So tell us, so like I said, it's such a gray area these days. There's all of this stuff going on that's, maybe it's been going on for years, but now it's more in the forefront. What are some of the first steps to keeping your company compliant? Like if you're thinking like, hey, we're a new company, what should we implement? As there's so many entrepreneurs starting new companies, what are some of the first things we should implement?
So that really the first thing is it all starts from the top. What are your values? If you have the right values, you put those values on paper. That becomes your code of conduct. If you're doing business inside the United States or outside the United States, there are certain laws you're going to have to comply with. You put those laws down as your company policy and then procedures to implement them. The best example I can give you is every company reimburses employees for business expenses. It's a standard business practice. The reason we do it that way is not for compliance, it's for IRS reasons. But if you do it for IRS reasons, requiring a receipt, requiring the person to describe what they've done, who they took out, make them sign it, make them attach the receipt, give it to their supervisor, have their supervisor review it and sign it, then send it to accounts payable for reimbursement. That's a compliance policy, and that's a compliance program. And I've just described to you a actual compliance program for anti-corruption compliance that you probably never associated with that.
No.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, tell us a little bit about, I noticed your book is almost 600 pages, so that's a little daunting. So how do people read your book?
So I wanted to write really one volume that encompassed everything. And you're right on the podcast theme. That gave me the idea of 31 days to a better compliance program. And as a side, if you want to grow your podcast or you want to start a new one, it's a great way to get your name out there. But the first chapter is 31 days, which I literally give you 31 different things you can do that month to improve your compliance program. And then the next 10 chapters take one part of the framework for a compliance program. So training, communications, internal investigations, hotlines, tone at the top, the role of a chief compliance officer, the role of a board of directors, all of those sorts of things. And once again, it's broken down to days. So day 1 through 30. And then the final chapter is that word that you love, Melanie, operationalization, where I go through and tie directly the legal requirements of operationalizing a compliance program to the specific techniques to do so. So you've got the legal end of it for the closing chapter and the final bookend.
Where are you finding that most corporations are falling off the tracks with this? What are some of the things you're thinking, oh my gosh, this is the three most common mistakes that companies are making?
Really, the most common mistake I would say is that the senior management says the right things and they probably do the right things and they think everyone else is doing the right thing, but it turns out they're not. And the best example I can point you to is Wells Fargo, where I think senior management had no idea what was going on down around the fraudulent accounts. And if they had been told about that, they would have been horrified. They said, well, we will never do that. And we can't believe anyone would. So it's really a disconnect between what management and the board of directors says and probably what they think from what's actually happening. And the only way to test that is to do ongoing monitoring. So companies have to monitor their employees to make sure they're doing business ethically and in compliance.
Because like the interpretation can be different. So like you say, they have it in the books. This is what the compliance is. But by the time it trickles down, it's almost like that theory of when you're a kid in school and you start the story and you whisper it to the next kid in his ears. And by the time it gets to the last kids, it's a totally different story. It's kind of a series of that, unless you're really going to the last kid and making sure it's straight.
Well, that's where the role of a subject matter expert or a compliance professional comes in. They're there to answer those questions. They're there to whisper in the ear, and they're there if an employee raises their hand to answer any questions. So that's the role of a compliance professional, to give them that information.
Do you see it like maybe a lot of companies, did Wells Fargo have a compliance expert on board with them? I mean, do most mid-sized companies, and I would think that someone like Wells Fargo would have somebody like that on staff, but I'm wondering, do mid-sized companies have that? Like maybe 100 employees?
So mid-sized companies have it, particularly if they're doing business internationally. We're here in Houston, the energy capital of the world, and almost every Houston-based company, if they don't sell directly overseas, they sell to people who sell overseas. So it's absolutely mandatory to have a compliance program. Wells Fargo, unfortunately, not only had a chief compliance officer, they had a gold standard compliance program, but there was a complete disconnect on what was going on the front lines.
Well, talking about overseas a little bit, I know that it kind of goes with compliance. What's really hot right now and what the buzz is I think it's GDPR. So tell us like how that relates, which is the General Data Protection Regulation that they're doing over in the UK. How does that relate to some of the stuff that you talk about?
Right. GDPR governs data protection, and data security in the EU and in the United Kingdom. It's a big part of compliance. In fact, there's now a separate GDPR compliance within the greater compliance community, but also if you do any other type of compliance, so anti-corruption compliance, anti-money laundering compliance, export control compliance, HR compliance, that's all going to be impacted by GDPR for two basic reasons. One is the data protection that data security to make sure your data is secure, but also what data can you keep? Under the EU GDPR law, you have to have a very minimum amount of personal identifiable information, and then you have to give employees the right to be forgotten or have that data erased. You have the right, employees have the right to make a subject matter access request for the data, and you have to be able to show the regulators that you have all of these protections in place. And finally, unlike the United States, if there's a data breach in the EU now, you have to notify the regulators within 72 hours of the data breach.
So how could a small or mid-sized company, like what can they do to make sure that they are GDPR compliant? Or what do they need to do? I know a lot of people have been redoing their websites or redoing their privacy policy, or who do they contact, or how are they supposed to do this? Because I know a lot of people are just kind of being ostriches and sticking their head in the sand and saying, I don't want to know, I don't know what, it sounds too difficult, sounds too hard, I don't know what to do. So tell everyone what they could do or where they should start.
So it's actually all compliance. It doesn't matter what area of the law it is, starts with the same thing, and that's a risk assessment. Assess your risks. So Tom Fox, the consultant, when I have to do legal work, if I have clients in Europe, then GDPR applies to me. If I just did law here in Houston, Texas, GDPR would not apply to me. On its most basic level, what's the risk that I would have of being in violation of GDPR? And the same with any of your clients, and the same with any small to mid-sized business. First, determine does GDPR apply if you have European customers or European touch points, and then from there, see what information you're taking, see what information you're keeping. Think about something as basic now as Salesforce. Salesforce has GDPR implications. A business card has identifiable personal data, down to the point of the difference between male and female, Miss, Ms, or Miss, or Mrs. That can be subject to GDPR. So it's really just a matter of assessing what your risks are, and then from there, determine the protections you need to put in place. Is that data secure? Is that information that you really need to do whatever your type of business might be?
Wow. And how expensive it is, like for a small company, small to mid-sized company, to have someone come in and do this for them. Like, can you consult us on what our risk is and to put that in place? What kind of dollars are they looking at to make sure they're compliant?
It really, it's hard to say without knowing the business they're in and the risks that they might have. So if I'm a 5-person software company here in Houston selling to the energy space, I've got one piece of software that does something very cool, but I'm so small that one, I need some funding from one of the big service companies, Halliburton, Weatherford, Schlumberger, or Baker Hughes. And I'm too small to have my own sales force, but I'm selling overseas. Unfortunately, under the U.S. Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, that's a huge risk. And you've got to manage that risk, because to get any investment or really unlock the potential of your company, you've got to have a compliance program in place. The same under GDPR. If I'm a business to business, I may have very little GDPR risk. But if I'm marketing or even talking to consumers in Europe and taking their information just to sign up for my website, then I've got a GDPR risk I need to manage.
Well, I mean, do you think that some of this is going to shut down some businesses?
No, that is absolutely not going to happen. People are going to figure out how to comply with the law. It is going to be a journey. It's going to be take some time. But here's the thing about compliance, that the companies that win the world's most ethical business awards, which has been given now annually for 15 years, they are 4 times more profitable than the average S&P company. And the reason they're more profitable is they have compliance programs. And that is because compliance is essentially internal controls. Remember that example I gave you of the the employee reimbursement form?
Mm-hmm.
That's an internal control. You don't think of it as an internal control, and you certainly don't think of it as a compliance control. But if you didn't have that control in place, employees could cheat much more easily on their expense accounts and make you less profitable. So by having a robust financial internal control system that operates as a compliance control system, which makes you more efficient, and I advocate at the end of the day, more profitable.
Yeah. I would say, us entrepreneurs, we're like, let's just do it. Let's go make it work, put it up there, and let's start selling it. And we want to go to the fun stuff. And you really have to take that step back, set up all your systems, set up your systems of operation, set up your compliance, set up all the rules, because it's it might be harder and more laborious in the beginning. But if you do that from the beginning, then you're going to have a much easier time on the back end, and you're going to mitigate a lot of risk that you could be taking otherwise. Like that's one of the key words, is just the compliance helps you mitigate any risk or legal action or wrongs that could really harm your company and take you down.
So let me break that down into both legal and business reasons. First of all, on the legal side, you have to document whatever you do. The 3 most important words in compliance are document, document, document. The reason is, if you don't document, in the regulator's eyes, it never happened. So if you went through every one of those steps in your head and didn't document them, a regulator would say you never did them. That's the legal defense. But on the business side, if you've done that documentation, if you put those steps even on paper, you're now ready to scale up. And you can scale up much more quickly, much more faster, and much more efficiently if you do have that right idea and are ready to move to the next level for your company.
That's a great point, because that's one of the big questions of entrepreneurs. How do I scale my business? How do I scale my business? We ask that of ourselves all the time. Like, if we want to take on even more clients, what do we have to have in place? Some of it is systems of operations, but you don't always take a step back on, the legal procedures, and it's really everything. It's like that architectural plan. That's such a good point, that I think so many of us don't make that plan so you can scale. So scalability means make a plan, entrepreneurs. Hear that loud and clear. I think that's so important that we all do that. All right, I want to take a minute, because you've written 16 books. Oh my gosh. So we think that, Jen and I, we're both, she's 11-time bestseller, I'm 10-time bestseller, but your books are like 554 pages. It takes it to a whole new level. And just by the way, so if you're a company, this is not a a book you buy for $10 or $19 on Amazon. This book is $395 because it's for your corporation. It's going to save you thousands, maybe millions of dollars if you read this book. And so that's what I think it's geared for. But I want you to walk us through why you write the books, what it does for your business, being an author, and how you use it for your business.
So being an author is the absolute best business card you can ever have. There is nothing more impressive than the first time you meet a client or prospective client, a colleague, anyone. You say, here, let me show you a copy of my book. Let me give you a copy of my book. Can I sign for you a copy of my book? There is nothing, I think, that is more impressive than that. If you go to a meeting, cold call, if you go to a meeting because you've been asked to attend, if you're responding to a request for proposal that you pulled out of the air, if you send a copy of your book with that, you have instant credibility. And I can't emphasize that enough. To put down on paper that you are a subject matter expert, first tells several things. First of all, it communicates that you are a subject matter expert. Two, it communicates you've got the stick-to-itiveness to follow through on that project and get it completed. And three, it actually makes you a better subject matter expert because you have to learn and research. Even if you know everything, putting it on paper, I think, makes you more articulate and gives you the ability to discuss more directly the concept that you have in your book. So I cannot emphasize that enough. I read that on your website. I've heard you say that, and you are 1,010% correct, not even 110% correct. That's
great. Well, thank you so much, Tom, for being here. Can you tell us where people can find you, where they can get more information?
Sure. The book's available on Amazon.com. Just type in the Complete Compliance Handbook. It's also available if you'd like an autographed copy on my social media site, fcpacompliancereport.com. People want to email me, I'm at tfox, T-F-O-X, at tfoxlaw.com.
I love it. And he's a Spartan. Anyone from Michigan that you're a Spartan.
And for those of you from Michigan who went to the University of Michigan, I went there too. So I've got it both covered.
I love it. That's my family. Everyone else went to Michigan, and my nephew's the assistant wrestling coach up there at U of M. So I got the rest of the family's over there. I'm the only defector at Michigan State, but I cheer for both of them. All right, so thanks so much for joining us, Tom. A pleasure. I think everybody learned a lot. And just to recap, make sure you get his book. If you have a company, your company needs to buy the book. It's a write-off. It's $395 on Amazon. It's a great investment. It's going to save you thousands, tens of thousands of dollars. And guess what? It's going to help make your business be scalable. So remember to subscribe to our podcast. We want to hear from you. Leave us a note and subscribe so you can get all this great content. And if you're looking to write a book and becoming an author to scale your business as well, we want you to contact us at eliteonlinepublishing.com. Go to the content tab and you can submit your submission right there. And we'll see if you're a good fit for us. So we look forward to seeing you then. And if you want to pick up our book, How to Write Your Life Story and Leave a Legacy, it's a great way to start your story, whether it's for business or for personal. Pick it up on Amazon, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Bye.
If you'd like to create the most powerful advertising tool for your business, contact us at eliteonlinepublishing.com, where we will help you create, publish, and make your book a #1 bestseller, and show you how to get new leads and more revenue for your business. If you'd like to check us out on our Facebook page, we have a free book for you as our gift. Just go and click Free Book. Remember to subscribe and leave a comment for our podcast. We would love to hear from you.